Okay, so this guy Nicholas Petrosky is a DPT on LinkedIn. I've talked to him maybe briefly. I think he either went to my same DPT program or he just happens to be practicing in Philly. So he's the owner of Petrosky Physiotherapy and Performance, and he posted on LinkedIn, and he wanted some help from the community, like his followers, whatever, about a podcast. And he said, for some time now, I have received the variation of different questions. When are you starting a podcast? And, basically he's wrestled with it, and, there's pros and cons. He kind of listed this post, and it was like pros and cons. Like, it was, he wants to, share his knowledge and insight and interview other clinicians or talk to other patients and things like that. But then it's the trade-off, right? It's the trade-off of, like, is it time? Like, do I have the time to put in 2 hours a week and record, and, like, would that be benefiting people listening? And he said, what if he could use those hours better to serve his team and patients, as opposed to doing this, as opposed to doing like a podcast. And so I shared it with you guys because we've been kind of talking about some things behind the scenes, but I know, there's always, like, there's pros and cons of some new project or some new thing. And I think that would at least get us started for this morning, because I wanted to share it with you guys. I think it resonates with people. There's a good amount of clinicians, and I think there's just a good amount of professionals out there in every industry that should be on a podcast or a show, and they might have some hesitation around, like, how and why and logistics and all that. So go ahead, Jimmy.
You just said the magic word, right? So I talk to a lot of people. People know me as the podcast guy because that's how I started, right? Background in broadcasting and radio. Came to PT, and then just got super excited at the amount of, like, super smart people who were in the profession. And I was like, this is 2014. Why aren't these things far and wide? Why do I have to fly to a conference to get this person's insight, only to have that person's insight be to disappear? It's never being recorded, right? Fast forward less than a decade later, and you have people who are walking up to this guy, Nick. This guy's name is Nick.
Yep.
Nick.
Hey man, why don't you have a podcast? Here's what I translate or boil down when I hear that. Hey, I really like I like your insights. I'd love to hear more from you. That's the what and a little bit of the why. I really like hearing from you. I feel seen, heard, understood. You can read into it as little or as much as you want. The how might be the podcast, right? And Nick is going through his pros and cons list. Brilliant. The word I wanted to stop you with is a minute ago. You said, does Nick want to have a podcast, or does Nick want to be on a podcast? Many people, and it's getting easier and easier, right? When I started, it was a lot more technical. Now we do a live stream. I'm standing on my deck with a set of headphones on. We're going to flip this from just a live stream and a video to a podcast in 15 minutes, right? So he's doing his due diligence. He's doing it right in terms of, and he's right in terms of, like, hey, what would it require cost-wise? Little to nothing. Time-wise, okay, let's say 2 hours a week for an episode, planning, putting it together, and putting it out there. He's right. So if he gets to the end of this analysis, this cost-benefit analysis, and says 2 hours of my time should be and could be best served somewhere else, he shouldn't do it. He shouldn't. In my experience, for me, it is worth it because I sort of like learning from people this way. So I would say he's doing it the right way by going through this cost-benefit analysis. This is not trying to convince. I don't try to convince anybody. I wind up talking more people out of starting a podcast than I do in. And I'm not talking them out as much as I'm sort of sharing and letting them know sort of like what Nick is doing. And a lot of people wind up saying, oh, I feel like I want to just be a guest on your podcast. I don't want to go through the rigmarole of doing this actual thing. And that's okay. I will say now, if you did spend an hour or 2 hours a week, that information or that effort is compounded with the power of what we're doing right now. Like, we've been live for 6 minutes, and as soon as we're done being live, I'm going to flip it over to my already established podcast audience. Now, these things are investments. I've been doing my show for 8 years. Tony, Dave, you've been doing your various things for years and creating content. If it's not worth it for you, you shouldn't do it. If it's not a hell yeah, it should be a hell no. But I like his process, and he arrives at the bottom line, like, what did he want? What did at the bottom of the post? What did he wind up with? Like, all right, so I'm not going to do it, or I, still need information, or.
He ends it with two questions. To start a podcast, I would need to see an area where I could provide exponential value question
Got it.
mark. And then he said, anyone have any guiding thoughts? So I don't know. Did I tag you? I
All
think I
right,
liked
hold
it.
on.
I was gonna tag you guys.
I don't know. This also could be, and I don't know, Nick, right? But this also could be it genuinely worth him asking, or this could be a zigzag. This could be him like, lots of people have asked me to start a podcast, and I'm holding back a little bit. I
And
don't
behind
know,
the
two
scenes,
hours, is it worth it?
he's already started it, is what you're saying. He's already started behind the scenes.
Or he's already decided we're gonna do it, and we're gonna play this little coy, we're gonna play this little game, like, I don't want to do this, but tell me how pretty I am, and maybe I'll show up for the Miss America pageant. I don't know. I don't know this guy. Could be either way. Neither's bad, by the way. Not taking
What
shots.
do you got?
Well, my thought is, this is really similar, and I talk to you guys about this, to what we do in physical therapy, right? So we've got a patient. The patient is not used to exercising, and the patient's like, well, how do I resolve my shoulder pain? Well, we can start an exercise program. The patient's like, wow, that's 2 hours, 3 hours a week. Do I have the time? Do I have the investment? Do I have to buy a membership? Do I have to get equipment? Like, the patient has been doing the status quo up to this point. Likely it's been 20, 30, 40 years of momentum that's carrying them through. Now we want them to change. And I had said, like, every minute of every person's day is occupied right now. There is no person that has time that isn't filled. And it could be filled with watching Netflix. I've been sucked into the Viking series, and every minute I get that I'm not doing something, I flip on Netflix and watch 5 minutes of it to just get caught up. So it's this person, Nicholas, he's busy, he's doing things. And I think it's even harder because he's probably doing things that make him money. There's a reward for what he's doing. And now you're going to switch and you're like, man, I'm going to be speaking into the abyss. Nobody's listening. Is it worth the time? Is it worth the effort?
Yeah.
So I always think about with my patients, like, how do I get them going down the path? How do I reduce the friction? How do I increase the momentum in a different direction? And I think if we solve that problem, man, I think the riches, come down the road. So what would you guys do? Like, we've talked about projects that we want to get started. What are some strategies you guys do on a daily basis? And it doesn't have to be business. It could be anything, but like, if you want to eat better, if you want to sleep better, if you want to change a routine or a habit. Dave, let's start with you. You've got a new baby in the house. Like, everything is upended for you, I'm sure. How do you create new patterns for yourself?
Oh man. I don't I don't write anything down. I mean, I think I have certain things that are non-negotiables, right? So like I think intermittently I took like a week off of this show here and there or whatever, obviously, when I had family visiting or when we were in the hospital or whatever. But there's just certain things that, like, for example, like my wife and I, like, and she knows certain things. Like, I'm putting out stuff to the Dave Kittle show. I'm doing this show. We do some cross promotion, whatever. This stuff is going to happen. Like, my wife just knows, like, but I don't waste time. I don't like dilly dally with the other things, but then also like exercise. Like, I pretty much have to break a sweat every day and exercise. And it's usually in my garage where I run, or it's in the living room, but most of the time it's downstairs. So those types of things. A small list of things are my non-negotiables. And then the other things that are maybe less important can take up take up space or become like the new de facto behavior or schedule or whatever it might be. So I think it takes, I don't know, I think it takes a lot of awareness. I think it takes some, experience and maturity, like with succeeding and failing in other areas. And so whether it's a new podcast or a new project or a new company or whatever, for me, I don't know. It's just like, I simplify, like I have like, family, my health and wellness, business. And then outside of that, like, I mean, weekend baseball, but I'm not going to a bar and, drinking with friends every night. I'm not doing fantasy sports ever. I'm not doing, all you can eat, wings at the saloon, at the bar, whatever. Like, there's certain things that just take away time and effort from like my main things. I have those main 3 buckets, like, family, health and wellness, and my business. And my business would be like concierge pain relief and this stuff, the video stuff, the content stuff for the mergers and acquisitions and all that. And then that fourth bucket, like the thing, whatever the thing would have to be, fit in one of those three things. Because if it doesn't fit in one of those three things, then it's going to be really tough for me to either have time or passion or inspiration or focus for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let me
So
ask you, before we go to Jimmy, I just want to follow up on that. So what was it that flipped the switch for you, Dave, to commit to PT Breakfast Club 2 days a week? That's a huge commitment, 2 hours of your life that you're giving up. What did you give up? Because you had to give up something. And what was it that made you flip the switch to say, I am going to commit to this? Because there have been multiple challenges in front of you and you still stuck through it.
I mean, there's other things where I need to, like some things on my practice side, get a little maybe less focused. Like I need to, I talked about a full-time physical therapist that was full-time, that was going to help carry us through this whole maternity process. And then 4 months in, he's like, hey, and this is fine, like that is public, but I'd rather be part-time and half-time instead of full-time, even though like the whole agreement was full-time. And, I paid a recruiting fee, $7,200. And so, things happen, right? What I would say, some things on my practice side probably have slacked. I need to hire like a remote admin. I need to recruit and hire more therapists, whatever. But the thing with why am I doing this or why, like us three, we started doing this once a week. I don't know if you guys remember Jimmy. I think he was really excited one day and he said, hey, we should do this like 5 days a week. And then I think Tony and I said, and maybe because I know Tony well, and this, I want to do more, but I also wanted to be realistic. So I said, I don't know if you guys remember, I said, why don't we do twice a week, which is where we're at now. So I said, instead of 1, let's go 2. I figure we could capture Maritato twice a week. We could all be doing this together twice a week. Maybe it increases over time, but I just know from my history of content and videos and interviewing folks and all that, I just know that this show and interacting with you guys is just, like I said, planting digital seeds. They grow into some other things in the future. And I have enough business awareness to know that those things that grow in the future, I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be something really good. And I'm okay with some of the delayed gratification right now. And so, yeah, some things might slack maybe a little bit on the business side. I can't have my health and wellness slack. I can't have the family stuff slack. And so, yeah, it kind of comes out of the business bucket.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this before, and I forget who brought this 3-question test to me. It might have been someone like Gary Vee, but it's called the grunt test. What do you do? How does it make my life better? What do I need to do to get it? Right. So you use this test every day. We use this test now, especially with short form video, tens of millions of times a day. You're constantly assessing, like, is this worth my time and effort? Because keep in mind, your time and paying attention is time and effort. How would I weigh starting a new project, or how did I weigh starting or continuing to do this? Which one do you want me to answer? I can answer both, Tony.
Both. You choose which one first.
So for this, I said, like, what is it? How does it make my life better? What do I need to do to get it? For me, it's an hour talking with people that are smart at different things that I might not be smart at. So I'm getting, right, just by giving that hour, I'm getting insights from different people. I say things like, I have never thought about that, or I never thought about that way, which means it's a topic I have thought about and I have a new perspective. So what is it? How might it make my life better? Makes me think, gives me company, right? If you want to say, like, okay, like, this is creating content, which I can do by myself. I can just turn the camera on, or I can interview people. This is different. And then what do I need to do to get it? You have to ask yourself, what am I putting in? Just like Nick did, it's 2 hours a week, right? I'm saying it's 2 hours a week, just like this, and then I do the math and I say, I'm getting more than I'm giving. New project, I do the same thing, except I'm not as calculated as everybody else. I'm a run into the fire to save the kittens way before I figure out that I'm running into a fireworks factory. I'm okay with that. I've heard Mark Cuban talk about things like this. I think I'm more like Cuban in terms of, like, I'm going to say yes, I'm going to figure it out later. And if it ends, it ends. So I'd rather go in there and break a dozen eggs, hoping that one survives. I act like that. So I'm a leaper. And then I look while I'm on the way down.
Yeah. And, we all kind of have very similar modes of operation with that. I know for me, I just shared on LinkedIn a post this morning about, like, looking at upside potential versus downside risk. And I think when we think about physical therapy, if I treat a Medicare beneficiary, I've got very limited upside potential, right? If I'm the delivering therapist, I'm going to make $100 a visit. That's it. I'm never going to make more than that for that acute hour of my time. But if I do a podcast like this and I surround myself with you guys and Scott's here and Karen and people that have been engaged with us, we're building an audience and there's literally unlimited upside potential. And like Dave said, I have no idea what's coming down the road. I have no idea where it's going to go. But I can tell you that over 49, coming on 50 years of life, I've seen more benefits from unlimited upside potential than I've seen from very capped upside benefit. So this is one of those things where to me, it's like, all right, I'm going to give something up. I'm going to commit to, minimum 2 hours a week. We're going to see where it goes. Probably for me, the hardest one is I gave up my Tuesday, Thursday runs. I don't like running in the afternoon. I love running in the morning. And this is like prime time. The weather is perfect. I feel my best. I don't have any sugar drops or anything. So that's a big sacrifice for me. But I think it's worth it. I think it's going to pay off in the long run. Now, practice owners, you're building community. I want to talk about, unless there's something else you guys wanted to mention about that, about starting a
No,
podcast or just doing something,
anything. To me, I'd sum it up: juice versus squeeze. Right? It's
Yeah.
I was talking to this with an organization I might be working with in the future. Everything's a seesaw, right? On one side is value. What might I get out of this? On the other side is cost. When you put everything down there, I know it's super cheesy, right? Make a pros and cons list, but really you're doing the math, the pros and cons. So juice versus squeeze, and put it on that value proposition seesaw, and see where it lands.